Mm, that's it. I'll read them in English. Yeah. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of attachment and hatred for those held close and distant. And now the foundation of all good qualities. I read from the translation on the FPMT website. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect Guru. Correctly following the Guru is the root of the path. By my clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. When I have discovered that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is extremely difficult to find again, and is greatly meaningful, please bless me to unceasingly generate the mind, taking its essence day and night. This body and life are changing like a water bubble. Remember how quickly they perish and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of negative and positive karma follow. When I have found definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be conscientious in abandoning even the slightest collection of shortcomings and in accomplishing all virtuous deeds. When I have recognized the shortcomings of samsaric perfections, there is no satisfaction in enjoying them. They are the door to all suffering and cannot be trusted. Please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Through my being led by this pure thought with great remembrance, alertness, and conscientiousness, please help me to make keeping the individual liberation vows the root of the teachings my essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother transmigratory beings. By my seeing this, please bless me to train in supreme bodhicitta, which bears the responsibility of freeing transmigratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta, without familiarizing myself with the three types of morality, I cannot achieve enlightenment. By my seeing this well, please bless me to keep the vow of the sons of the victorious ones with fervent effort. By my having pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. When I have become a suitable vessel by training in the common path, please bless me to immediately enter the holy gateway of the fortunate beings, the supreme of all vehicles, the Vajrayana. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping my vows and samaya purely. When I have gained effortless conviction in this, please bless me to protect them even at the cost of my life. Thus, when I have realized exactly the vital points of the two stages, the essence of the tantric sets, and I'm enjoying the yoga of 4 sessions without effort, without being distracted by non-meditation objects, please bless me to accomplish these according to the teachings of the holy beings. Thus may the virtuous friends who reveal the noble path and the spiritual practitioners who correctly accomplish it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely the collections of outer and inner obstacles. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. And by completing the qualities of the grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. And now the short mandala offering. Hmm. Mhm. Oh, mm. Wow. Fish. So first of all, we'll just read the place where we left off from last time was the third of these qualities in the under the first heading of using suffering as a path through considering oneself. So it was the third of those, which is dispelling haughtiness. So the translation reads, despising others brought by pride orientated towards oneself destroys many virtues and is the basis of a multitude of misconduct. Think, if it is the door to much harm, I will use this suffering to overcome my inflated ego. I will eliminate pride because it is seen as a sorry state. So it's kind of downplaying one's, exaggerating one's own pride and downplaying others' situations. And so so then we taking up the explanation of taking taking up the explanation of this third section, where it talks about here about haughtiness, but actually probably the main thing being discussed here is pride, and also but we can also include in these there's in a general sense that we think of things like pride and anger as being sort of very bad, that they're unconstructive, and they're things that we need to get rid of. But that's kind of something that everybody, most people sort of have that sense, and certainly probably Dharma practitioners. But we all sort of have that. And but if we think about why they're bad, why do we think of them as being very unconstructive or bad? It really comes down to just our kind of experience of them and experience in relation to them and of them. But we need to sort of find a more sort of deeper we need to find a deeper reason why it is that we say that these things are bad, that they're negative, they're unconstructive. And so what and so here is specifically mentioned as the title of haughtiness, but the main factor here is the pride. And what is it that pride what is the problem with pride? What is the fault of pride? And one of the things that it does is it stops us developing qualities, and specific it stops us developing our own qualities, and specifically it stops us developing the qualities in the way that the great beings such as the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas possess the qualities that are possessed by the great beings such as the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in their continuum. It stops us from developing the qualities in that way, and stops us in general from producing our own developing our own qualities. And also, uh, in fact, pride is a contributing factor in causing the decline of those of qualities within us. But obviously, talking about specifically about positive qualities, and particularly those that we would try to emulate in the great beings. And it also then becomes a condition, which is mentioned here in the text of the pride focus on oneself, but on and then caused by that this sort of downplaying or causes us to disregard or sort of downplay the situation of others, and so it's these things such as pride and haughtiness. Obviously, I mean, eventually we have to completely remove them, but we definitely there is at the beginning that's very difficult. So we also have to find ways to work with reducing them. So um, normally, if we're sort of thinking about it, it's not just these are not just things that are said in the text. We have to sort of look into how we practice and the reasons and the way in which we should practice in order to do this. So we do lots of our virtuous kind of spiritual practices, such as making prostrations, making offerings. For instance, making offerings, making water offerings, but all kinds of offerings to the let's say to the to the Buddha's Bodhisattva, our general way of making offerings. So, for instance, making offerings is something which does is to counteract our miserliness and to develop generosity. So, probably the main reason that we do prostrations is to reduce our pride. So that's one of the counteractive forces to it. But and the pride. And so this is the pride stops us also from seeing the qualities. So the reason why particularly prostrations in relation to, say, our gurus, the prostrations act as a counteractive force to because the pride is stopping us from seeing the qualities in the gurus or the great beings. And why is that a problem? Because as much as so there are different levels at which we're able to see, to relate to, say, our gurus. One would be to relate to there's the way in which we relate to them in the sense of seeing them literally, seeing them as the Buddha, experiencing them as the Buddha, or experiencing them as the yidams, what is sometimes called the tutelary deities, are kind of personal deities, or in seeing them as an ordinary person. And then when we receive teachings from them, we listen to teachings by them, and we have certain realizations or certain understandings that come from receiving teachings from them. But there is a big difference between the the ways in which we would receive teachings and receive our understandings and get benefit of understanding from those teachings in relation to the different ways in which we perceive the guru to give those teachings. So we can get much more subtle understandings and realizations if the deeper and the more the kind of the deeper or so more subtle way in which we see them helps us to to um uh to develop deeper and deeper understandings and realizations. And also another factor is that I'm just trying to find the verse from I don't have it in my memory, the second verse from the 8 verses of mind training, where it talks about the taking, for us taking the lower, here we are, whenever I'm in the company of others, and I will regard myself as the lowest amongst all, and from the depths of my heart cherish others as supreme. So this verse from the 8 verses of mind training also gives us a great ability to whatever company we were in, if we reduce our pride and allow ourselves to, if this is see ourselves as the lowest amongst all, then this will allow us. It gives us the more we do that, it gives us a greater and greater ability to take sentient beings as a basis for understanding and developing qualities. Mm. Samadhi. Mm. In his oh oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, so um, then so looking at this the problems of pride and having uh the difficult the complications that come from having too much pride, and there's a text which talks about how um the root, the kind of basis of all developing all qualities it's sometimes talked about. Faith is often talked about. Having faith is often talked about, and I think here specifically faith in the guru and the teachings is talked about as being the as being some which is sort of the basis of developing qualities. And the problem with pride, one of the big problems of pride, is that that faith, the greater the pride in ourselves is, the less the faith will be. The pride stops us from having pure faith, and it prevents us from then developing all of the qualities that we desire. We can't bring those qualities into our to our mental continuum, particularly when we have very strong pride. And this sense of pride, and preventing the qualities, is seen quite clearly in one particular in the kind of spiritual history of Marpa, where there's a history of him that at one time he has to choose he has to choose between the between the guru and the yidam in terms of having faith. I think he's asked about having whether has which one we'd have in faith in the personal spiritual deity or the guru, and because of him choosing the yidam rather than the guru through some sense of pride, this acts as an this is a famous history of him, that it then acts as an obstacle in his future practice to attaining to swift it acts as a quality for him, as an obstacle for him to be able to attain the fully enlightened state in one lifetime. So that's the history from Marpa's spiritual history. And then in terms of, so what we're talking about here is when this is in relation to an authentic guru. So we're not really, this discussion is not really about the gurus or the faults or the qualities or faults in the guru. It's about let's say take it as read that we have an authentic guru, and even if we receive the best of advice and instructions from them, then what can happen is that even the slightest amount of pride within ourselves prevents us from being able to receive the instructions and properly receive the instructions and rise to realizations on the basis of them. And there's a story, a second sort of story from regarding the Buddha, which is related in a sutra. I haven't read this, but I've heard of this story about a nun who I think it was at the time of the historical Buddha, and the nun, I think she was connected with a tradition of a non-Buddhist, related to a non-Buddhist. I think she was related to a non-Buddhist king, but she had great faith in the Buddha himself. So in some sense, she had great faith, but there was also but she had great faith. She listened to the teachings of the Buddha, but she wasn't, and so she listened to the teaching, extensive teachings of the Buddha, and then went to try to do kind of retreat or practice on the basis of those teachings, but she wasn't able to she wasn't able to bring out much kind of a feeling or experience from those instructions and teaching. And so she went back to at some point she went back to the Buddha, and sort of she was confused about this and went back to the Buddha and sort of requested or spoke to him and said, I don't understand why that I've listened with I've listened with some faith to your teachings, and I've tried to sincerely put them into practice. And so the Buddha says to her, well, you you sit you explain to me the you explained to me what it was that I taught you, and I think so that I think the nun sits on a throne, is that she sits up on a throne to explain what the teachings are, and uh, and then because of this pride that she develops from doing that, then she's not a this pride then is the thing which has prevented her from being able to correctly develop the realizations of the teachings. So this story, both of these stories show us that any form of pride can be an obstacle to our spiritual development. Oh. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's- Mhm. So I just Breen has put the in the chat the verse from the 8 verses of mind training, which is the 7th verse, which it says in brief. If you haven't seen the chat, it says in brief, directly or indirectly, I will offer help and happiness to all my mothers. and secretly take upon myself all their hurt and suffering. So that was the verse that Rinpoche was quoting from 8 verses of mind training in relation to keeping things secret. And so now we move on to the fourth of these yakikaro. Yeah, yak is frozen. I'll keep translating and then Yaki will be back. So then we move on to the fourth of these. Oh, he's gone. Yeah. So, so we go on to the fourth of these qualities, which is the hey, the shunning of negativities. Uh, okay. Okay, so so then this is the fourth of the sort of qualities that comes uh, uh, from above, from the being glad when suffering arises, and then the powerful discerning wisdom. So it reads, despising others. I'm sorry. When huge torments such as this suffering arise, think that those who do not wish for it should give up non-virtues, its causes. Focus on your past faults and downfalls, and with the four powers, cleanse and purify them, and make effort so that not even a trace of them uh, will remain in the future. So, in relation to this, uh, then uh, as is mentioned here, when we talk about sort of shunning negativity, sometimes it's also Dikbashaba, it's something like laying open and a kind of confession of confession of our negativity, and then the counteraction of our negativity. The one of the best or well-known methods is the four antidotal powers, or the four antidotal forces. Um, and but before we discuss those, there's also in the kind of in the monastic uh, ceremony of what's called sojong, which is a kind of repairing or purifying ceremony of the mistakes that have been made in relation to the vows. There's a section where the the monastics are instructed to see faults as the fault. And so also you have to so it's possible you could sometimes sort of understand see something as a fault, but not actually understand why it's a fault, so to speak. There's sometimes this situation where you could so it is also very important to understand why things are faults, not just to be told something is faulty and accept it as faulty. So this happens in the kind of purification and restoration ceremony, which is called Sojong. So they actually asked, "Have you understood why it's a fault?" And everybody says la. Everybody says yes. And then they say, "Have you will you restrain yourself from them?" And everybody says yes, we restrain. So this is the purification. So that process is we can take that process and apply it to anyone's situation in terms of their practice, the virtuous spiritual practices, and thinking about obviously the purpose of virtuous spiritual practice is the purpose of spiritual practice is to enhance our virtue and to be able um, to enhance our virtue and to be able to to be able to shun or get rid of our the negativities and faults within us. And so it's also, and one of the important features of understanding is to see what is the associated the associated suffering that comes with those faults. So in terms of understanding that it's a fault, one of the ways to understand that is to see that in relation to the suffering which come, the relevant sufferings which come from in relation to those faults. Now, in terms of the four antidotal powers, one of the key powers in that is it's translated in different ways. Sometimes it's called the power of remorse, the number top. So sometimes the power of disenchantment or remorse. Sometimes it is translated as the power of rejection. But what it has this sense of is both the sense of feeling bad about it, but also to be turning away from it. There are two important components of it. It's the force, and so it's the force of complete remorse, but of also turning away from so understanding the negative actions as faults, seeing the reason why they're faults, and then turning away from them in the future also. So this is so it's important to see to understand why they're like that, and then to be able to turn away from them, to reject them or to turn away from them, to be disenchanted with them or have remorse for them. And so that's an important part of that's a very essential part of the process of giving up on or turning away from negativity. And we also have to sort of, we have to be realistic. We have to understand that we often have attraction to things which are unconstructive, are kind of negative in their nature. But also another way to sort of turn away from them is to understand the greater advantages of not engaging in those negative practices, but engaging in more constructive and virtuous practices. And that also is a way which helps us to essentially rely on an antidote. And then there are also the practices related more with emptiness, where we sort of seal the whole practice with the understanding of all of the elements involved in the rejection of the suffering, rejection of the negativity as being empty, and again, understanding in terms of understanding things like the way that the process through which things like anger and attachment work they're kind of as an attractive element to them, even whether it's anger or attachment, which then draws our mind out, and then we engage in the grasping, the kind of grasping and engaging into these objects which have appear either attractive or unattractive to us, which takes our mind out of ourselves and away to the objects. And then of course this is talking about the way to rely on the antidote at a deeper level, that understanding that the grasping at an inherent nature of phenomena is the fundamental root of all suffering. And although stand that all phenomena exist in the way they exist is through a lack of inherent existence, but of course they appear to us they still whether we understand that or not, they appear to us to inherently exist, and we have to understand that is a mistaken condition. And then by understanding that mistaken condition, this becomes the force of kind of rejection or turning away from the negativity. Yaki's frozen, I think, again. No, you're okay, Yaki. Is he okay? Oh, and so yes, oh, sorry, and there's one last piece. I think Yaki's still going. So there's one last piece to this. And in the translation, it's the very last piece of the translation where it says, and the four powers cleanse and purify the faults and downfalls, and so we make efforts so that not even a trace of them will remain in the future. That's so we how do we ascertain that we've completely how do we have confidence? We need this kind of confidence, strong confidence to be able to answer. So I'm asking you this as a question. We have a kind of strong we have to have you have to have some kind of strong confidence to answer the question of how do we ascertain so it says 톱신 daksu chongwa. So we need so you are able to cleanse them, and then that there will not be even a trace of them in the future. So we should make effort in this. But how do we know how do we know that has happened? And this is my question to you. How can we ascertain that we cleanse and purify them so that not even a trace will remain? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's frozen. And it's okay. Yeah. So then I was sort of asking you that question about how do we know that, how can we ascertain, how do we know that, having properly applied the four antidotal forces, um, how can we get this kind of certain ascertainment that that the that these negativities, the negative actions and our kind of negative things have been thoroughly kind of cleansed and purified. Um, because we do, sort of in our when we're doing our daily prayers and recitations, um, and our virtuous practices, daily virtuous spiritual practices, and then we sort of we make prayers for these kind of things, but what kind of signs are we going to get in order to understand that we've kind of turned away from uh this negativity, that we've shunned these negative factors and turned our backs on these negative factors. So we need some kind of understanding of what are the signs, uh and it's a little bit difficult to understand that, perhaps, in terms if we think solely of in terms of looking at negativity. But if we turn that around and look at the opposite of that negativity, the positive, virtuous side of things, then if we were so looking for signs in the opposite way to see if, signs of improvement, then if we see ourselves sort of being drawn or drawing ourselves or being drawn closer to virtue, and that virtue and positive qualities getting becoming closer with our minds, um then um then that would be one sign that, because seeing the opposite of the negativity increasing. And but uh so that sense of being and sort of, and then we can maybe, if we can see that whether we are improving or whether we've got greater understanding or improvement in this area. So um through the side of virtue, right? And so that we can, because if the virtue is increasing, then slowly the negativity must be uh so it's this sense in which we're getting further away from negativity. And also, but of course, an important factor is seeing the faults and understanding the faults of the negativity. But it's this to evaluate this, it's this real sense of how are we, or are we moving further towards, closer to a kind of virtuous aspects, and therefore becoming further away from the negative aspects or not. So this is probably the best way to evaluate whether we are purifying or cleansing the negativity. And so now we come to the so the end of uh the last the end of the fourth one. It says so. Uh, it says that in the future, um, it, we should, in the future that none of these, not a trace will remain of these things, and then there's also so there's an encouragement to remove all of the faults and downfalls through the power, through the cleansing power of these four powers, and but then a kind of direct counterpoint, the kind of opposite of, or the thing which comes from the shunning of negativity is where we come to part number 5, the preferring of virtue. So there are kind of, in relation to shunning negativity, then comes the preferring of virtue, where it reads, think happiness devoid of such suffering will bring benefit only. Therefore, if I prefer happiness, choose happiness perhaps, in which suffering has been turned back or turned away from suffering, I will exert myself in its causes virtues, and with this recognition gather the accumulation in many ways. So this talks about the wish, the desire, or the wish for increasing, strengthening our virtue, and then, of course, the accumulation of merit. And sometimes we think about so most of us, the way that we think about the accumulation of merit is that, in the sense that, perhaps either in relation to the sublime sort of beings, the gurus and teachers, who maybe have given us practices, or we perform practices in relation to those sublime beings, such as, then we think basically that if we develop greater merit, then there'll be greater happiness. It's often as simple a relationship as that for us. And um, uh, this, what we have to think more deeply of is the way in which I explained before, that you need to also understand the advantages of the virtue and positivity, and the disadvantages of the negative side of the actions. And then in when you're engaging, so it's understanding the faulty side of the faults of the negative side, and the advantages and positive aspects of the virtue, and then engaging in the virtue is a more, so it's important to understand the faults and the advantages and faults, and to we so the greater that the greater that understanding happens, the greater our accumulate the merit, the merit that we accumulate increases. But one of the important things about talking about this word accumulation, because people, whatever kind of practices people do, such as doing prostrations, making offerings, doing butter lamps, any of these practices which are considered to be virtuous practices, the word accumulation in its essence is to talk about um, accumulating together the causes and conditions, um, and also to create to stabilize and to increase or enhance our virtue, so that it has this sense of stabilizing and increasing our virtue and accumulating the causes and conditions. So in the text where it says, I will exert myself in virtues, uh, and with this recognition, so with this recognition of preferring happiness, understanding the advantages of happiness, and turning away from suffering, you will exert yourselves in virtue. So this sense of even in ordinary aspects of our lives, sometimes we have this sense of being happy when we do things. So this has this uh, also a kind of joy in doing them, and the recognition. So this is what accumulation means, to have a stable and stably in improving our virtue. You finish, Yaki? Yaki's finished. Yep. Okay, so then this that's the completing the preferring or choosing virtue, and then in the last section, the last section of these qualities is developing compassion for sentient beings. So it reads, think just like me, sentient beings are tormented by such sufferings, and suffering and their suffering that is even greater than mine. Considering this, generate compassion, thinking, may they too be free from all suffering. So when I looked at this, so this is a kind of first of all, this is a kind of uh, uh, almost like a little bit like it's not exactly right, but it's a little bit like the definition of compassion at the end there. May they too be, or may, wishing for sentient beings to be free from suffering. It's not quite the definition, but it gives a very good understanding of compassion. And but I was, because underneath you'll see it says taking suffering as a path through focusing on others. And these are the two sort of textual categories which come from above, where it says you taking suffering as the path, or using using suffering as the path should be, has two sections where it talks about using it as a path in relation to yourself, and using it as a path through focusing on others. So I was a little bit sort of I had a little bit of a doubt here, which I would like you also to think about yourselves, because I was wondering, well, normally we would this is in the section of the text which is taking using suffering as a path in relation to oneself and not in relation to others. So I thought that was a little bit odd that it would be here in the section in relation to oneself. So so then I was thinking about this, and I'd like you to also, contemplate this. This is the results of my reflection, but I'd like you to contemplate on this. And also, this sense of what, may they too be all free. How wonderful it would be, or may they too all be free from suffering. This thought, how nice it would be, or how wonderful it would be if they were free from suffering. And this is something that, in the Buddhist teachings in general, and definitely in the Mahayana tradition, there's a great value placed on compassion, um, uh, and obviously in the Mahayana tradition also a great emphasis on bodhicitta as well, so compassion and bodhicitta. And also, and then the techniques through which bodhicitta arises, such as the equalization and exchange of self and others. But then there's also, if we boil that down to its essence, then the main factors are understanding the faults of cherishing oneself, and understanding the qualities of cherishing others. But actually, when we talk about what's the problem with understanding the faults of cherishing oneself, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to immediately answer that question. If we're very honest, it's kind of in an immediacy. It's a little bit difficult to answer why self-cherishing, because when in our lives, in relation to many people in many situations and people in our lives, we really often feel like we see others difficult situations and problems, and we wonder how it's possible that we could, we wonder how we can really help them. How can we take responsibility for them? How and we'll often even wonder how it would benefit us to do that. These are the ways that we actually think. But then we have to look at what sort of happens to us, or how does it affect us in the sense of in relation to others, the suffering of others. And if we look at it from a kind of cause and effect perspective, then so this is in relation to why this section would be here in the using of suffering as a path in relation to oneself. Then, of course, the first of all is as we've talked already before, the understanding of the samsaric situation that we find ourselves in, and then developing a kind of confidence that we can sort of counteract this situation by reducing our negativity and increasing virtue and taking delight in our virtue. And then if we can see this, sort of have this kind of confidence to try and find our way out of this samsaric situation, if we can see that in ourselves, then it's almost like once we're able to see that situation in ourselves, the suffering samsaric situation, and a wish to overcome that, then it's a little bit, it's something like it would be something like an aspirational bodhicitta, something like that, where we then see that in relation to others, and we become un uncomfortable or unhappy with seeing others suffering, and they're seeing their situation and their suffering, but and a sort of a sense of wishing to take responsibility or take that on, although actually, of course, it's very difficult to actually take on. But when we see others when we see in relation to into relation to ourselves, then we see in relation to that in relation to others, that condition, um, we and understanding how that perspective helps us in order to start to work towards removing our suffering, then, and having that sort of confidence, then that then almost naturally kind of causes us to feel this in relation to others. So I think that's why, although it's included in this section, we have to sort of do it in relation to ourselves first. And in an analogy of this would be and this kind of confidence would be in an analogy of this in terms of knowing not knowing all about a particular doctor or a particular medical treatment or something, or not knowing anything about it, and therefore having difficulty to have confidence in it. But if you know about either the doctor's skills or the perhaps the medicine also, and having confidence in that, then we'll feel more comfortable to follow it, and therefore and the scientists these days, there's been a lot of analysis by scientists about studying the effects of compassion on the mind, and they found that these they found that these ways in which the development the development of compassion in people's minds leads them to a kind of stability or kind of equanimity, or some sense of kind of peace and mental ease. So those are sort of contributing factors to, but I was wondering why it had come up in this section, and I would like you to also go away and think further about that. So the important point being here that you know, it has to be what I'm saying to you is that it has to be done in relation to oneself first in order to understand that in relation to compassion in relation to others. Mm. And so uh so just there'll be a very short piece from me because Rinpoche spoke in English. So just Rinpoche was saying about His Holiness talking about compassion is not a question, it's an answer, and that without that the stable understanding of compassion, then we can't know that. So what Rinpoche just repeated the when it says in the text in the last line of the sixth thing where it says, may they too be free from all suffering, doing a denas. So it means may they too, I hope that I wish that, may they be free. So it says, may they be free, but it doesn't say, it doesn't sort of say, whether it's possible to be free or not possible to be free, or whether we we should help them to get sorry, it says it's just the thought, may they be free, may they be free from suffering. It doesn't necessarily have this implication, so it has this implication of not of sorry it it's not immediately that all the suffering is removed. So it's and this in relation to the story I was telling, that the compassion is a kind of sympathy. Having sympathy doesn't quite fit the understanding of compassion, because compassion has that sense in, like, may they be free, rather than sympathy, which just sees the suffering. So it has a different kind of aspect to it, which is important to remember. Um, that's all Rinpoche said apart from the English. Isu. Tole.